people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. It appears that official fight news is imminent in reference to Derby's own Sandy Ryan. And it appears she is, in fact, going to be running it back with former Argentinian champion Erica Farias. Erica, in Sandy's last fight, she gave Sandy her first professional loss. It was more than Sandy Ryan bargained for.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people were expecting Erica to win that fight.
Yeah, I sure as hell wasn't. I picked Sandy Ryan by way of knockout. Erica surprised me. She surprised us all, really.
Thinking back on that fight,
I think what won Erica that fight, if my memory serves me, it's that she wasn't waiting for Sandy Ryan to come to her. She brought the fight to Sandy, the activity. She didn't shy away from the action, didn't shy away from the power. I think that left Sandy a bit flustered.
Erica Farias is durable, she's experienced.
A professional record of 27 wins, 5 losses, no draws with 10 knockouts. Erica's never been stopped.
I thought Sandy would be the face to do it.
Erica was in a bad way. She was coming off of 3 consecutive losses, dating all the way back to 2018. The 2 back-to-back losses she suffered to Jessica McCaskill. The more recent loss she suffered to Michaela Mayer in the super featherweight division, moving back up in weight for this fight with Sandy Ryan. I figured Sandy'd be the first to do it. Sandy would be the first to stop Erica Farias, but Erica would have none of
It
it.
was ambitious putting Sandy in there with Erica. Sandy only had 3 pro fights ahead of that one.
Sandy is very statuesque for 140 pounds, very statuesque for the super lightweight division, and she has genuine stopping power. We actually saw Sandy hurt Erica Farias in that fight.
Hurt it to where maybe if she would have put it on, she could have stopped her.
But Erica's resilient, and she upset the apple cart for the then unbeaten Sandy Ryan. I think what Sandy's got to do in the rematch is she's got to be busier, because in that first fight she did seem flustered. It seemed like she was looking for one shot, one single punch to do.
She was looking for one punch to do it.
Looking for a single opportunity to take her out, land a power shot. Erica made that difficult, because Erica was very come forward, very gung-ho, very aggressive, throwing punches and bunches, coupled with her experience and her resilience. She was able to secure the W that day.
Now they're running it right back.
I think Sandy's keys to success to secure the W in the rematch is she's got to use that lead hand more.
Establish that jab and establish distance.
Give Erica Farias something to think about before she tries to close the gap. Crowder, get all in her wheelhouse. She's got to establish that lead hand, step into it, and throw punches in bunches, because Sandy Ryan has already shown she's got enough whack, she's got enough power that she can hurt Erica. But if you're looking for a single shot to do it, well, that's not going to do it. You got to put punches together.
Yeah, Sandy's got a height advantage on Erica.
Yeah, I recall those 2 McCaskill fights Erica had way back when, and how Jessica McCaskill was landing uppercut after uppercut after uppercut for a taller fighter.
Because Sandy's got a height advantage on Erica, she can really drive that punch.
Turn her hips into that punch, turn her hips into it, and perhaps take Erica Farias out.
Drawing experience from the first fight in order to win the second fight is to not be flustered by Erica's toughness and gamesmanship.
But she's a tough old broad, you know. She's not just going to collapse off the first hard shot that lands. She's never been stopped.
32 pro fights, she's never been knocked out.
Having been in there with the likes of Ana Laura Estecha, Delphine Passoon, Jessica McCaskill, Cecilia Breakus, but she's never been knocked out. She's never been stopped.
Sandy Ryan could be the first one to do it in this upcoming rematch.
I like her chances. I like her energy. You know, they're running it right back. It's not like that April Hunter, Kirsty Pavington situation. You know, Kirsty, she gave April Hunter her first professional loss, and April very recently got herself back in the winner's bracket, just not against Kirsty, where Sandy must really like her chances against Erica Farias. Her team does, and they're running it back. They're going right back in there with her. I like it. I like Sandy Ryan to finish the job this time. I like Sandy Ryan to knock Erica Farias out. In women's minimum weight news, the ongoing rift between Estrada and Goldenboy Promotions continues. She's hopeful of a July return as her career is stalled by this dispute. Portion of the article reads, headlining my own show would be nice for now. I'll just settle for getting back in the ring, Estrada told Boxing Scene. I had a big year last year. I fought 3 times and beat 2 world champions back to back. I'd like to do that again this year. Of course, it slowed me down with the whole Goldenboy situation. Hopefully we'll be back in July. If we can't figure it out with Goldenboy, we're in May. and I still don't have a fight. So July, and hopefully still fighting 3 times like I did last year. The situation is, Estrada now...
And now a strange promoter, Goldenboy Promotion.
They're at a standstill over the direction of her career, with her frustrations shared through recent Instagram stories available to her more than 145,000 followers on the social media platform.
Look, when there's a rift between a fighter and the promoter, 9 times out of 10 it's about money.
It's my guess as to what all of this is all about, though. Senicia Estrada hasn't been far from the sport. She has been doing a lot of commentator work, and to that, she said, "It's nice to be able to expand my horizons," admits Estrada through a disclaimer, "but I'd much rather be in the ring. Fighting always comes first."
It's her story, and she's sticking to it.
Whereas according to Goldenboy Promotions, there is no dispute with Senicia Estrada on our end. We're waiting to hear if she will fight on our July show, a show that's rumored to be Ryan Garcia's ring return because he let it slip this past weekend.
That's when he's supposed to be coming back.
Now, I can assure you there is no dispute on our end. Eric Gomez, president of Goldenboy Promotions, told BoxingScene.com in a response to a recently published story citing Estrada's frustrations over her current inactivity, "We've offered her a couple of fight dates, and we are waiting to hear back from her. We have a show coming up on May 14th where she was offered to appear, but she passed up the fight. We're now waiting to hear if she wants to fight on our July show. We're not going to negotiate through the media. That's not how we operate. But she has our offer for the fight, which we believe is very fair and beyond her best payday. It's up to her to decide."
So I get the sense that what Senicia wants is more money.
It's between her and Goldenboy Promotions to decide just how much they're willing to agree upon. This is something that boils down to a contract dispute, or perhaps renegotiating a contract, renewing one. That's between them.
The girl's got genuine star power. I think a pay increase is warranted, but...
If Goldenboy Promotions decides to stand on their square, Senicia Estrada might very well take her business elsewhere. Maybe she goes to Matchroom. She stays on the platform, but she goes over to them.
John Cruz did. She very recently became her division's undisputed champion.
Portion of the article reads, "The hope now is to get her back in the ring for a July show in the works." Goldenboy wouldn't commit to the lineup, although unbeaten lightweight contender Ryan Garcia let it slip while in attendance for the Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano blockbuster event at Madison Square Garden.
Ryan said he's coming back July 16th.
I don't really think Goldenboy Promotions can afford to lose Senicia Estrada. They don't have the most robust stable as far as stables go, and Senicia Estrada is one of the fighters they got that actually has genuine star power with the right promotion.
What's it going to take to settle this? An extra 100,000? An extra 200,000?
We're very proud of everything Senicia has accomplished. We're all from East LA, and it means a lot that she won her first 2 world titles with us, notes Gomez. We want her to be part of our July show, but we can't make her fight. It's not like we're not being fair, but it's up to her to decide if she's ready to return. The offer is there whenever she wants it.
That's the stalemate. She's holding out for more money.
That's what it sounds like. And if the difference between Senicia fighting on that show and not fighting on that show is a difference of, I don't know, $100,000, $150,000 to $200,000, cough up the bread.
As if you don't, she might take her business elsewhere.
And Eddie, be remiss.
Benavidez, I think that's a big fight. But again, I think sales mentality is, as I said, the last 10 fights against 8 champions. Give me the champions. Ultimately, the fight against Benavidez and the fight against Charlo are just voluntary defences of his 168-pound title. But again, another voluntary defence. If you said to Saul, what would you rather do? Fight Benavidez in a voluntary defence or fight Beterbiev for the undisputed light heavyweight world championship? It's not even a conversation. Benavidez and Jose Benavidez, they genuinely want big fights. It's embarrassing who they're fighting. Charlo, it's embarrassing who they're fighting. Time and time again. Why don't you make Benavidez against Charlo? Why don't you make Benavidez against Plant or Plant against Charlo?
At 147 pounds, the PBC staged a round robin of all of their boys at that weight, even if it meant excluding Terrence Crawford from that mix for years. But they did it. They made their guys fight their other guys. That's what they did at 147 pounds that they didn't do at 168 pounds that they're still not doing.
Look at who those guys are fighting.
Look at who they've been fighting, and then look at who they are fighting.
It's obvious they've miscalculated.
What, you thought that all of these guys ain't got to fight nobody else and they ain't got to fight each other because what you wanted them to do was stand on line, single file, all waiting in line for Canelo Alvarez fight?
What the fuck made you think think Canelo was going to go for that?
It's obviously what you were hoping for. That's what Tom Brown has been harping about as of late.
But they offered him Errol and Jamal and David.
When it was obvious what Canelo wanted, it was obvious what he was after. He was after the belts. He wanted to become an undisputed champion. And he did that.
Why don't you do a round robin with those boys now?
Now that he's achieved that goal and he's become that division's undisputed champion, what's stopping you from doing a round robin with your boys between 160 and 168 pounds?
What's stopping you?
But like you got a promotion. You're giving them all these easy fights for all this money. They can't sell. They're not selling these fights. You're just burning money. So get the guys together, make the fights. I know Benavidez. I've been around him. He wants big fights. It's their job, the PBC's job, to put him in big fights, and they're not putting him in big fights.
Before Canelo Alvarez even kicked off his undisputed campaign at super middleweight, David Benavidez ranked there as that division's WBC champion, parallel to Caleb Plant, the then unbeaten IBF champion, and they didn't make that fight.
Why didn't you make a unification match with them the same way you just made one between Spence and you guys?
What the fuck were you waiting for?
Oh, I see. You thought you'd keep those guys away from each other.
You figured after Canelo Alvarez is done with the Sergey Kovalev fight, we'll have two active reigning world champions here for him to fight, as opposed to just one.
But David blew the weight, lost the title on the scales.
That made him irrelevant to Canelo's undisputed run. Canelo was after alphabet titles. Alphabet title that David was no longer in possession of.
It's worked out beautifully ever since.
You didn't make Benavidez versus Plant before Canelo's undisputed run. I don't know what effort, if any, is going into making it now that he is an undisputed champion, and that's fine. Caleb's coming off a knockout loss anyway, but what about Benavidez versus Charlo?
Certainly a better fight than Benavidez versus Lemieux.
Charlo versus Sulietsky. I mean, who do you think wants to see those
I was
fights?
excited about him.
He's a very good fighter. A Canelo-Benavidez fight could be a massive fight, but it's nowhere near the size of what it could be.
So when you say Charlo doesn't deserve a Canelo fight, do you believe Yildirim was more
No,
deserving?
it was a mandatory. If he didn't fight him, then he would have had to vacate the belts, and he couldn't become undisputed at 168.
How many times have you heard me iterate that same sentiment here on this channel? How many times have you guys out there, you yourselves, had to explain this to one of these mongs that are out there acting like he chose Yildirim?
He wasn't a handpick, he was a mandatory.
And it's not like the WBC up and just decided to make Avni Yildirim the mandatory challenger for the green belt. He was the mandatory challenger for the green belt long before Canelo's undisputed campaign even started. He was the mandatory as far back as when David Benavidez had the belt.
Are you listening?
He was the mandatory challenger back when David Benavidez had the belt.
But ahead of that Romer and Gulo fight, David blew the weight, lost the title on the scales.
How many times have I had to tell that story here on the channel? How many times have you guys out there had to tell that story to one of these mongoloids out there that bring up Yildirim as if he was a handpick?
Why even bring him up if you refuse to listen?
Why ask questions and why bother to have a conversation about it if you've already made up your mind?
You bring up Yildirim so you could then bring up Charlo.
Jamal Charlo isn't very good.
Guy sucks.
Ducked Andre, ducked Benavidez, and who's he fighting now?
You know what Canelo Alvarez did? During a pandemic, in 10 months, he had 4 fights in 10 months. He boxed Callum Smith, and then he was told by the WBC, if you don't fight Yildirim, you lose your belt. Therefore, he can't be undisputed. He went out after fighting in December and boxed in February. Right, during a pandemic to beat Yildirim. Then in May, he boxed in front of 76,000 people at Dallas Cowboys to dethrone Billy Joe Saunders. And then in November, he fought Caleb Plant. We talk about 10 months. He had 4 fights.
I'm talking about Canelo Alvarez's undisputed run. His critics will tell you that the guys that he fought, those unbeaten champions, Callum Smith, Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, that none of them were very good. But what was Juan Macias Montiel?
Was he?
What was Brandon Adams? They'll tell you that Canelo Alvarez is just fighting Euro bums. Well, where the fuck do you think Macias Sulietsky's from?
Well, he ain't from Texas.
Sulietsky's from Poland. Derevyanchenko's from the Ukraine.
Keep accusing Canelo of fighting Euro bums. Well, what are those guys?
The difference between the European fighters that Canelo Alvarez fought and the ones that Jamal Charlo are fighting is the ones Canelo fought with champions.
Unbeaten ones.
Like the one he's fighting tomorrow at light heavyweight. The Europeans that Canelo fought with champions, whereas the Europeans that Jamal Charlo's fighting,
They're leftovers.
you fought Danny Jacobs and Gennady Golovkin's leftovers in Sergey, and you're fighting Demetrius Andrade's leftovers in your next fight with Macias Sulietsky.
You fought Jaime Munguia's leftovers and Juan Macias Montiel and Hannes Stogan.
You're critical of Canelo Alvarez for fighting European fighters even when they're unbeaten champions, but you're not critical of Jamal turning down Demetrius to fight a guy that Demetrius beat.
So I'm not saying that Charlo's not a great fighter, but you're calling Canelo Alvarez out without... Who's his next fight against Charlo? Was it Sulecki? Lovely kid. Sulecki.
Now, you can raise the same talking points that I've been raising here on this channel. You can repeat everything you heard Eddie Hearn say. You can do all this, but to these guys,
Goes in one ear and right out the other.
that's what happens because they're regurgitating the same questions, regurgitating the same tired old narratives that have been dispelled. They're regurgitating the same spiel, the same shtick.
They'll ask you the same old questions, but won't listen to the answers.
I'll bring up Avni Yildirim, and you'll tell these guys why Canelo Alvarez fought him.
Goes in one ear and right out the other.
Even if you bring up what Oscar De La Hoya and Roberto Diaz said, that before any of this, Jamal Charlo was already offered the Canelo fight, and he turned it down.
Goes in one ear and right out the other.
What the fuck is wrong with these people?
You stupid or something?
You can tell them all this, and the only thing that's going to happen...
Goes in one ear and right out the other.
I think I'm repeating myself with these sound bites. These guys are repeating themselves with these stupid fucking questions, and they've been repeating themselves when the answers are out there. The answers are there.
Writing's been on the wall. You just don't want to read it.
Your problem is you want us to view a guy like Jamal Charlo as being head and shoulders above Bivol when he isn't. You want us to view Jamal as being head and shoulders above the likes of Callum Smith,
That's it.
Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders. You think it's special that Jamal is a 2-division champion? Well, so is Billy Joe Saunders, but Billy's got a better middleweight resume than Jamal does.
You're mad the world doesn't want to play along in your fantasy.
That the world isn't accepting your delusional takes on boxing, which really aren't even boxing related. The only reason you feel the way you feel about that guy is due to tribalist sentiments, which the rest of the world don't give a fuck about.
Jamal ain't special.
And neither is David. Errol Spence Jr., he's a fucking welterweight. What the fuck does Canelo Alvarez get out of fighting a welterweight?
And even if he fought him, you wouldn't be happy about it.
Canelo Alvarez had put that guy in the hospital faster than that Ferrari did when he flipped it. And I categorize them as delusions and fantasies because this is a sport we're talking about. These are statistical matters of fact we're intended to discuss. Not feelings, not your fucking feelings.
Nobody cares how you feel.
Fuck what you feel, because any other sport, any other fucking sport on the planet, facts and stats matter, but not when it comes to boxing, because you got these delusional guys.
They ask you all these fucking questions like they're prepared to have an actual discussion about it.
They're ready to have an intellectual conversation, only so that as soon as the facts and stats are brought up, the reality of the situation, that you want this guy to fight Jamal Charlo when, according to the facts and stats, Jamal Charlo was already offered this fight, and somebody on his side turned it down. And it's not just coming from Oscar. It came from Jamal's own brother. It came from one of his sparring partners also.
Yeah, the guy that was very recently on a boxing voice.
The cat's out the bag. The writing, it's been on the wall for some time now. It's been on the wall for years, and some guys, they just refuse to read it. This kind of a descent, a deviation from reality, borders on delusional, borders on insanity.
You know, the content creators that propagate these narratives, their motives are easy to understand.
Those guys are motivated by money. And anybody can understand that. Those guys are motivated by money, and they've made misinformation into a business, a lucrative business. And that bit of it you can understand. But it's the guys that actually opt for this misinformation and swear by it. It's these maladjusted individuals that have gone off the deep end.
These guys go out of their way to ask all these fucking questions.
Only so that when you actually give them the answers, it goes in one ear and right out the other. There's nothing that can be done to help these people, and the saving grace is that no one is trying to, if not for them pestering other boxing fans.
It's not for that. Nobody bother with these idiots.
Canelo's fighting Dmitry Bivol tomorrow. Don't like it? Don't watch.
Enjoy Charlo versus Sulietsky.